So I'm back with my 2009 BMW M3 to talk to you about what it's like to own and maintain a high mileage example. So I'll start here with the engine. Because this is where most people's concerns lie when it comes to a high mileage M3. With good reason. The S65 is a very expensive engine to replace. But with, you know, proper maintenance and care, they're not bad. Yes, the rod bearings should be replaced. Mine have been done. They were replaced prior to my ownership. I replaced them after I got the car again because I don't really like the OEM rod bearings, and some people don't follow the correct procedure for torquing the rod bolts down, which can lead to issues in the future. So I had them replaced with aftermarket units that have a fraction of a bit more clearance for oil. So there's that. There are other things on this motor that will fail, that will cost you money. Obviously throttle actuators. That's an expensive day, especially if you're paying for labor too. The idler control valve is an $800 part. And if you're paying for labor, it's going to cost you even more. There are two valves on the back of the motor that are for the secondary air injection that get stuck and cause check engine lights. Those are very difficult to replace with the engine in the car. A few other things. You're going to deal with oil leaks. Your valve cover gaskets are going to leak. Your oil filter housing gasket's going to leak. The valve covers are particularly annoying because BMW was using magnesium for them. So sometimes when you replace them, they still leak. Thankfully, there are replacements that are made of aluminum that are actually cheaper than buying OEM BMW magnesium valve covers. Keep that in mind. The oil filter housing gasket isn't expensive, but it's about 5 or 6 hours worth of your time to replace it if you do it yourself, and you're going to be paying about 5 hours of labor if they follow the book, which is going to cost you. Okay, so in California at least, if you're having the engine mounts replaced at the same time, you're looking at around $3,000 to replace the rod bearings, which all things considered isn't too bad. Considering even a used S65 is anywhere from $6,000 to $7,000, all the way up to $10,000. Brand new, you're talking $25,000 from BMW. So if you don't have records, spend $3,000, replace your rod bearings and your engine mounts, and be happy. Now, if you're servicing and maintaining the car yourself, you should get used to pulling the plenum, because pretty much everything you're doing on top of the engine requires you to pop this plenum off. Your throttle actuators are under there, your idle control valve is under there, your fuel tank vent valve, which is another common failure, lives under the plenum. If you're doing the valve covers, you are taking the plenum off. It's not hard. It's 8 hose clamps that you have to undo, and it just kind of pops up. Again, nothing about maintaining these is difficult. It's just time consuming, and parts are generally more expensive. But again, not terrible. Okay, so spend a little bit of time talking about the engine. So let's talk about another important part of the car: the brakes. This car is fitted with some very large rotors from the factory. These are 14-inch rotors. Not only are they 14 inches, but they're also a two-piece rotor. The center hub here is made of aluminum. The outer ring is, of course, steel. What this means is that they're kind of expensive. This rotor is $277. That's a piece, and that's about what it is for all four. So a full brake job, pads, rotors, everything. I mean, you're looking at over $1,000 just to do all four brakes. So that's another cost you need to consider, especially if you're considering tracking the car. You're going to go through brakes quicker than a normal person would. So you're going to want to factor that in to your decision as to whether or not you should buy one of these, because these aren't cheap. I mean, even if you do replace them with a aftermarket brake kit, that's still going to cost you a lot of money. Another thing, since we have the wheel and tire off, is if the suspension hasn't been replaced, that's going to be on your list of things to do, because at 100,000+ miles, the shocks and struts are worn. And you can get OE ones, but they're going to cost you a lot of money because, well, they're going to cost you a lot of money if your car has EDC. If you don't have EDC, you just have standard suspension, it's not going to cost you that much. If you have EDC suspension and you want to replace it with EDC components, okay. So if you want to replace this strut with a original BMW EDC strut assembly, it's $911. That's for one. There are some other options. Bill Steen sells a Damptronic that works with the EDC system, which is only $589. So either way, suspension and brakes are also expensive on this car. They're not in any way close to being a basic BMW braking system, except for the brake pads. The brake pads are normal. The brake pads are cheap. It's the only thing cheap about this car. Your control arms are M3 specific. You can get kits to replace all of them at once. But you can do a full front control arm refresh for around $400, which isn't bad considering. I mean, these are the things you have to think about when you're buying a high mileage car, because it's not just about the engine maintenance, it's about the maintenance on the entire car. Everything has high mileage. Control arms have high mileage, your transmission has high mileage. Your brakes have high mileage, your suspension has high mileage. So you need to consider all of this when you're factoring that into whether or not you're going to buy it, because that's all going to cost you. Like I said, when I did the brakes, it cost me about $1,400 to do all the brakes because they all needed to be done. Mostly because the rotors appeared to be OEM and had a very large lip on them, so they were well worn out, well past minimum spec. So that's why it cost me so much. Now, is it worth it though? I think so. I've driven a lot of cars, but none that really feel the way this car does. Mostly because of the engine and the transmission. You know, rear-wheel drive, V8, 6-speed manual, revs to 8,400 RPM. I mean, that all accounts for so much, and it makes the driving experience so great. So I think it's worth it. But if you are planning on buying a higher mileage E90 or E92 M3, even E93 if you like convertibles, is try and offset some of the cost by learning to do the work yourself, because the truth is, it's not that difficult. It can seem a little intimidating because of the way it looks when you open the hood, but it's just taking things off and putting them back on when you simplify it. And it does get expensive. I mean, I went through and I kind of totaled up everything I've spent on this car with the minor modifications and maintenance that I've done on it. And it's totaled up to about the price of a used Mazda Miata. Like an NC Miata, not an ND. Not that much. But, I mean, you talk like $8,000 or $9,000 worth of maintenance. And that's pretty much everything done by me except for the rod bearings, because I don't have a lift and I'm not going to lay on my back for that long to replace the rod bearings. It's like the only thing I paid for was the rod bearings. And even if you're going to do that yourself, you're looking at about $1,800 for parts. So these are a lot of things to factor in. But, again, it's worth it. And if you're planning on modifying the car, wheels, suspension, stuff like that, don't bother spending the extra money on a comp package, because once you've changed the wheels and the suspension, you've pretty much taken away everything that made the comp package a comp package. So don't really worry about that. But yeah, I've enjoyed my ownership experience. And the car has never left me stranded. It's never been on a tow truck. It's done track days, canyon drives. It served as my daily driver for a year. Never once let me down. So it's not that they're unreliable, it's just that they require some TLC. You have to care about these cars to own them. You know, you have to want to put in the effort to keep them going. Because if you don't, if you neglect them and you ignore issues, then you're going to have problems. But if you fix issues when they arise, you take care of the car, and you maintain it when it needs to be maintained, you're going to have a good ownership experience. And there's other M3 owners who can attest to this. I mean, there's people out there with 180,000 miles on these, 200,000 miles, 250,000 miles on S65s with, you know, rod bearing services that have been performed, but original engine otherwise. So they're not terrible. They're not unreliable. They're just maintenance heavy. We'll call it maintenance heavy. I like that. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Like and subscribe if you want to. There will be more M3 content in the future. Thanks. Bye.